Hi, I'm Tessa, a veteran educator working in the field of special education.
And I'm Kim, mom of 2 autistic boys and a late diagnosed autistic person myself.
And welcome to Totally Over the Spectrum, where we dive into embracing autism through understanding and support.
Hello, and welcome to episode 49, where we're talking about having an autistic family.
Well, this is most definitely your wheelhouse. So I'm going to allow you to take the floor, and I'm just going to jump in and ask questions and provide some information on the research that I've done, and put the links into at the end of our podcast so people can access them. Because once again, kudos and a shout out to the National Autistic Society in the UK for some brilliant research.
Okay, well, I do get asked about this quite a bit, and if anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section, because I always answer any questions, and I like to read people's comments about their experiences and stuff. Being a caregiver is a demanding job. It's also a really stressful job. So there is a ton of literature out there on the impact of stress for caregivers, and how stressful it is partly depends on the person. Like there are some people who get a lot of enjoyment out of caring for others, and that can be children or aging parents, or as a profession like a palliative care worker. But no matter how much you enjoy it, you need a break. Like everybody needs support. There has to be a balance between caring for someone else and making sure that your own needs are met. And that can be really difficult when you are a caregiver 24/7. So when you have a child with a disability, especially if they require a lot of support, that can be very demanding and very, very stressful. So I broke it down into a few different things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. People know it's stressful, but there's emotional stress, physical stress, and financial stress.
Yep.
So I've read a lot of accounts of parents feeling overwhelmed, isolated, hopeless. They develop anxiety and depression, and then those mental health issues can have impact on your physical health. Also suffering from exhaustion, sleep deprivation, more physical demands, like if your kid's an eloper, or just constantly trying to clean up the trail of destruction that they leave throughout the house. And then financial stress, like therapy is expensive, support tools are expensive, trying to work a full-time job and care for an autistic child is not always possible. So that's not to say that this isn't worthwhile. I'm just saying that this is usually, if you were to Google this, or people are usually looking at the negatives. That's usually what you hear about first.
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom, and there are different supports and strategies that you can put into place. And speaking about the demands that it requires from you, the number one strategy I always offer parents that I work with is putting self-care as a priority. If you cannot, I'm going to take the oxygen mask analogy. In order to help your partner, your child, your family, you have to care for yourself first, because you're no good if you're passed out on the floor.
Yeah, I think that is sometimes easier said than done.
I agree. But this has to be one of your number one strategies in order for you to be able to effectively implement everything else. So whenever parents say, oh, I couldn't even imagine how stressful it is. But please, you need to put self-care as your number one. Example, when you were sick, and Alex was sick, and Peter was sick, and I walked in and I thought, oh my dear Lord, I've just walked into World War III over here. You were rendered absolutely helpless. You could not care for Alex or Peter. So the importance of self-care, you had to look after yourself first. You had to prioritize yourself first in order to come up to a level in which you could provide care for them.
Okay. Yeah. So that was fairly recent that happened.
Yes.
So in all of the years, so Alex is 21 now. And that is the one time that I have ever actually called someone to say, hey, we're all sick and I need help. And it was because I actually physically couldn't get up off the floor. So once in all of that time. So for anyone who doesn't know, I'm a single parent. I've never actually told, like, we haven't actually talked about how I became a parent. So if you're okay, I think I'll just briefly. I didn't want kids. Sorry.
Oh, that's a disclaimer.
I didn't. And, yeah. It wasn't high on my list of things to do. But my partner really did want to have kids. So we talked about this and we decided collectively that we would have a family. The relationship did not work out. I was officially a single parent shortly after the kids were diagnosed. Alex was 6 and Peter was 3. I have no regrets. There's never been a single day where I've thought, this is too hard, I should never have had kids. I've never had that thought. The reason I didn't want kids was that I thought it was going to be terribly time consuming. I also,
and it is.
I didn't think I'd be a good mom. And the number one reason was that I was absolutely terrified that there would be something cognitively wrong with them and that I wouldn't be able to relate to them. Like they would have an intellectual disability and I wouldn't be able to have a deep conversation with them. And I just couldn't imagine having a meaningful connection if that was to happen. Yeah. Irony. So it turns out it is terribly time consuming. Yes, that is correct. I'm not a terrible mom. I'm pretty good. I'm not the best mom.
You're a phenomenal mom.
So
you're a phenomenal mom.
Which would have been an absolute shock to anyone who knew me before I had kids. And I relate to my kids very much, even though Peter is non-speaking, because speaking is not the only means of communication, and you can have an incredibly meaningful connection without a whole lot of words. So if I go back to the beginning when the kids were going through the assessment process, it was incredibly stressful. There were a lot of unknowns. I was doing my best to manage the kids' needs and to be supportive to my partner. And I had no idea I was autistic at the time. So I didn't actually know what my needs were. And I can push myself past all reasonable limits and still baseline function in times of high stress. Like I can run on very little sleep, just powered by anxiety and adrenaline. And did I ever crash? No, I didn't. I didn't burn out. I didn't, because in my mind that wasn't an option. And I don't know if other people have that. They talk about burnout like there's nothing you can do to control it. But I feel like either I have a very high threshold or I can simply just continue to push through the burnout. So maybe I was burnt out and I didn't know it, but my drive to make sure that my kids had everything they needed every day overrode everything else. So you talk about putting your own needs first, and I didn't even know what my needs were. So I knew that I had to make sure I was fed. I had to make sure that I had enough sleep. But other than the base requirements of what anyone needs in order to survive, I didn't know. I just kept going because there was no option but to keep going. Like, what am I going to do?
That is a clear example of what a phenomenal parent you are. And making sure that you had the right amount of sleep and you had the nutrients in order to allow you to function was putting the minimal self-care aspects into place. There are some people who completely forget about that, who forget to eat, don't sleep, and that's when they go beyond the burnout, right? So you put at least a couple of measures into place in order to overcome that. So kudos to you, Kim. You may not have known that you were doing that, but that's what you did instinctively. So that speaks to you as volumes as a person and more importantly as a parent.
I think that I was also pretty lucky that my kids are both good sleepers, and I know that not that autistic people can have a lot of sleep issues. Sorry, I'm gonna just write that down because we did talk about sleep issues in another episode. I was also very good at setting up schedules and routines. I didn't know that that's because I needed them. It's just I naturally put those in as a support mechanism for myself over the years and just didn't know that I did it. So
Yeah.
that actually really helped my kids because they needed it as well. So that was all sort of automatic. And I think that is one place where a lot of parents struggle initially, is to set up those routines. And I was just doing it. So it was just a little bit easier for me in that regard.
And it helped you regulate and it helped them regulate. So once you're in a state of, you know, regulation, a lot of other things do fall into place. So yeah, one of my top 3 strategies is establishing routines. So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Once the kids were diagnosed and it was just the 3 of us, that was easier for me to be a single parent because I no longer had another person in the equation that I had to try to help regulate their emotional needs. There was one less person I had to sort of think about in a day. So it was actually easier for me to be a single parent, especially if trying to navigate everything and then compromise was hard. That was a hard thing. So once it was just the 3 of us, there was still a tremendous amount of stress because you were trying to learn everything you need to know to understand your kids and support their needs. Yeah, I had to learn about autism. I didn't know anything about it. How it was different for Alex than Peter because they're both so very different. Their needs are very different. I had to learn about the education system. I had to learn about occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, physiotherapy. Everybody has their own language in all of these things. Everybody has their own systems, their procedures, and then you're trying to implement these things in order to support your kids. That's a lot. That is a lot.
It is a lot. And education was my number one. Through education, you have the ability to understand what the demands and needs are and then implement and establish routines, which was the next one to follow. So thank you for saying that.
I also did things like I had downtime for all of us whenever possible. So I would disregard the advice of professionals if it didn't make sense for me. Like I didn't just take someone's word for it because they're supposed to be the expert. So a lot of experts, the kids were diagnosed in 2010. So things were a little bit different. And there was this big push then, at least, I don't know about now, but then it was screen time was bad. You shouldn't allow them to have free access to screen time and the internet and all of those things. And I'm like, don't care. Thanks very much. I never denied my kids access to screens. I never did. And I didn't try to cram in as much extracurricular stuff as possible. So it was basically one thing at a time. And they still tried lots of things, from like swimming to horseback riding, and if it wasn't working, I let it go. I just let it go. So once I felt like I understood autism and what Alex and Peter each needed, everything sort of leveled out. Once I felt like I had the information, because that's one of my requirements. That's one of my needs as an autistic person. I require information. If I feel like there's information out there and I don't have it and I need it, my anxiety is really high. So once I have the information, it no longer feels stressful in that way for me. And it's not like there weren't always new and exciting issues that arose, like life-threatening food allergies or chronic pain flare-ups that took 2 years to diagnose, school issues, selective eating, that's fun, that's still ongoing, trying to figure out how to get vitamins into Peter's diet, getting them to take medication when they're sick, or a week-long stay at the hospital with no conclusive diagnosis. Good times. Elopement, still ongoing. So basically keeping them both alive on the daily. Yeah, that's still a thing, even though they're 21 and almost 18. But the things that other parents were talking about never resonated with me. I never felt lonely. I never felt isolated. I never felt burdened. I never felt sad that my kids were autistic. So I couldn't relate to parents who were sad.
I would like to hear from parents or caregivers who have experienced that, and what it is in particular, if it is something in particular or several things that caused them to feel that isolated or that sad. I would love to know what it is that, led them down that path, and try to connect the dots, so that, if people don't mind sharing and commenting, we'd love to hear from you on that point.
I had people say to me, people were sad for me, which was also weird. So I had one person say to me, "Oh no, Peter's 10 and he's still in diapers. What are you going to do? It's so expensive." First of all, I know it's expensive. I pay for it. There's also funding available through Easter Seals on info on our website under funding. Just saying. Also, I knew Peter wasn't going to be in diapers when he's 20. And they're like, "Well, how do you know?" Well, because I know him. I understand how he works. That's what I've been doing all this time. So I know that he has full bodily control. I know that he isn't wet overnight, ever. I know that he knows what to do and how to do it. And when he decides he's actually going to use the toilet, it's going to be like he never didn't use the toilet. And that's exactly what happened. So I don't spend my time worrying about things that I can't do anything about. I needed all of the pieces to fall into place in order for that to happen.
So you used strategies to limit what was in your control and what was not, and address those issues effectively. So that was a good strategy that you put into place inadvertently. That, you may not have known that it was a good strategy, but you did.
Yeah, I think that happened quite a lot. Well, it just I don't understand why people are sad that my kids aren't going to live the kinds of lives that these people think is the only path to happiness.
Because that is from a neurotypical perspective, right? From a neurodivergent perspective, if you ask a lot of neurodivergent people, how's life? And they're one of the happiest people and most content people that I know. And they're living the authentic life. So it's the neurotypical people that go, from my perspective, I go, yeah, this is far more pure, organic, holistic, whatever way you want to choose to look at it. It's one of the better paths.
I don't have a ranking system for people. So I think people put a lot of their ideology on what happiness is based on where they think people rank in their system. So I had someone say to me, "Oh, well, we want Peter to reach his full potential," and I said, "Why?" And I because I imagined full potential to be like, say Peter had the potential to be a neurosurgeon. People seem to think that that's like a, ooh, that's a wonderful, amazing, that person ranks higher than, say, someone who works uh, as a barista, for example, in their world of hierarchy. And to me, even if Peter could become a neurosurgeon, if he was happier being a barista, we didn't have all of the pressure and the demand and all of that. And when he left his job, he could go home and just decompress because you don't carry your job home with you. If you are making enough money to sustain yourself in a comfortable way, and you're meeting all of your needs in that respect, where does the full potential come in? Like if that person who becomes the neurosurgeon isn't actually living a happy life, they could be. They could thrive on the stress of the job or whatever. But if you know what I'm saying, like if that's not where their happiness level is, then what's the point of that?
That's a good question. And I think a lot of people out there are on a quest to answer that question. And you just put it in a nutshell for them. So, kudos to you, Kim.
Well, I just think happiness is the point, isn't it?
It is. It is.
And both my kids are
All
happy.
the frills and the fancies. They are. They're one of the happiest and most content kids I know.
They have
Absolutely.
they have little to no anxiety. They're extremely good natured. They're loving. They're caring. We still continuously work on their individual needs like executive functioning, independence, communication, but I think we're also having a lot of fun along the way.
Yeah. And that is an amazing accomplishment. Amazing accomplishment. And that's thanks to you being at the home.
I wonder how difficult it is for a neurotypical parent to have an autistic child. Because I think I have just I, I I understand them, inherently understand them.
Yeah. And I think that is the key component over there is when you have neurotypical and neurodivergent and having that communication and understanding, building those bridges is at first can be very, very complicated, time consuming, emotionally, mentally, and physically draining. But once those are established, things do get better, things do improve. So the legwork begins when they're very, very little and establishing those boundaries and those bridges are going to be key to success later on in life. But the link that we're going to be posting at the end of this from the National Autistic Society in the UK actually breaks it down into different areas of support. And I think if anybody's looking at that, I think they're going to be able to relate to a lot of the information.
I think for an autistic family to be successful is that there just can't be any ableism. Like whether that's overt or internalized. There needs to be full acceptance and support of autistic differences. Because it seems to me that that's where the hang up is. When people feel like, oh, but they're never, or um, that's ableism.
I always look at my students and go, they're unable to do that task at the moment. That doesn't mean that they're never going to be able to do that task in one form or the other. By saying never being able to is limiting them and not allowing and stunting their growth. And I think that is the biggest disservice you can do for your partner, for your sibling, for your child, for your parent. So always allow them to reach the potential that they're able to reach. Don't define it for them. Allow them to define it for themselves.
I've never understood that idea of putting a limitation on any child. Like, I've met professionals who said to me, oh, Peter's never going to be able to blend sounds. Like, how do you know? How do you know that? Your years of experience have told you exactly what Peter's going to be capable of. You might say in your experience it's unlikely. You haven't seen it before. It's a low probability, but you can't say no, never. You don't know that. And
I think. Go ahead.
No, finish.
I think you brought up a key point over there. It's when professionals plant that seed of doubt, it sets the threshold for that person to say, oh, they told me it'll never happen, so why am I going to try? And you chose to disregard some of that information and go, actually, I'm going to try, and I'm going to try different avenues. And one of my most favorite people, Temple Grandin, will tell you if it wasn't for the perseverance and the dedication from her mother, she would not be who she is today. So
I don't understand the hubris of someone who thinks that they can predict the future. Like, you don't know.
Mm-mm.
So
No, you
so
don't.
what are you doing right now? And
Try.
to his credit, Peter then blended sounds like 2 weeks after she said that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, he did.
Oh, don't tell Peter he can't do something. That was
Exactly.
one of the strategies I used. Oh, I don't think you can do it. Excuse me, Miss Marshall? Did you just say I can't? It's like, yeah, okay. Tick, you can do it. So reverse psychology works perfectly here. So
I think I like having a neurodivergent family. Like, maybe I wouldn't relate to my kids as well if they were neurotypical. I don't know. I don't have any of those. And I don't know what people think an autistic household actually looks like day to day. I'm sure it looks different for every single household, first of all, because everybody's needs are different. But my house is pretty calm.
and every day is going to be different. Oh yeah, your house is so peaceful. I get a holiday to come and look after your kids.
Because they're allowed
They're exhausted.
They're allowed to self-regulate in their own way. That's why I don't deprive them of screen time, because if screen time is their hyper focus and that's what helps them regulate themselves, why would I take away the thing that brings them the most joy in life? And it's not like I can't interrupt them. I could stop them at any point during the day and say, okay, we're going out right now. Zero prompting, zero expectation that this change was going to happen. And they'll be like, cool, where are we going? That didn't happen overnight. That happened through constant exposure to new things. And I can remember even when Peter was little, I would have to take him to appointments, and he would have his iPad with him, and the professional, whoever it was at the time, would say things like, oh, is it okay if we take his iPad away? And you can see how nervous they are, like they're waiting for the meltdown to happen. And I'm like, oh yeah, Peter, can I have your iPad please? And he'd just hand it to me. And the shock on people's faces, it became very entertaining for me, actually. That I was just so surprised at the shock, because he knew he was getting it back.
Yeah. Absolutely. And these are all strategies and that you've put into place naturally and instinctively because you were able to relate so effectively with your kids. So, and I think the difficulty comes between neurodivergent and neurotypical living in the same household. And that communication piece needs to be so critical, is so critical. And honesty and consistency, those are the strategies in which are going to help bridge those relationships in having a more harmonious family life.
I know that there are good relationships out there between autistic people and neurotypical people, like partnerships or any kind of relationship, and it comes with changing your expectations. Putting neurotypical expectations on an autistic person is going to result in failure every single time. You are asking someone whose brain is wired differently to rewire their brain for you. That's not going to work. How's that going to work? Never going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, I can do it for short periods of time for you, but I'm going to burn myself out doing it. So I wouldn't ask you to rewire your brain in an autistic way.
Yeah. Mutual respect. So that's why your family situation is so harmonious, is because of everything that you have just described to us. And I just hope that this helps people understand that navigating an autistic family is not doom and gloom. It actually can be peaceful and blissful and holistic and happy.
Yeah, we're good. And it's not to say that there isn't stuff that happens all the time. Sure there is.
But that's life.
That is life.
Yeah. And you have to learn to navigate it effectively and together. What else have you got on your list?
It's all I have on my list.
You know, you brought up some really good, important points over there. And neurodivergent brain to a neurotypical, right? It's removing somebody's authentic self from the picture. So I think for our 50th episode, I think we need to bring the quirkiness out and just bring out who we really are at the core and let our listeners get to know us a little bit better. Are you up for that?
I am super interested to see you let go. Because you always maintain a certain level of professionalism on the podcast. So I would like to see you actually be your crazy self. And I say that with love. People don't know, but that's meant with love.
Yeah. Yes.
Because I feel like as I get going, I don't always mask myself on the podcast. It's like I get irritated by something and it just all comes out. So I feel like I am less nervous now than I was when we first started. To the point where I'm like, this is it. This is what's going to happen today.
Yeah.
But I feel like you're a little reserved. So I
am.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, that's part of my job is to maintain that emotional regulation when everything else is spiraling out of control, right? Because if I spiral out of control with everybody else, it's gonna, like a Tasmanian devil has appeared. So it's instinct, professional aspects of it. Excuse me. So, but yeah, we'll bring it out in the next episode.
So I would be super excited to see you be your authentic self.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna try.
And hopefully our internet connection will be better.
Yes, I hope
this
so.
Is super,
our apologies.
Super irritating.
Yes. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay. All right.
Okay. Well, until then, everybody have a great day, and don't forget we're going to put the links on at the end of our podcast.
I will do that. Thanks for tuning in. If you know someone who might find this episode helpful, feel free to share. Also, check out our website and socials linked in the description.